All right. And we are live here on July 17th, 2023. Welcome to the Dev Talk Show. You see me, I'm Chris Gomez. And let's see if I get this right. No, I knew I was going to go the wrong way. And you see him. See, I got to get better. I have to point over there. That's what it is. So those of you watching, it might look like I'm pointing. Well, I am actually pointing across my body, but I am not pointing in what my brain is telling me is parallel.
Yep.
But there's Rich Ross. How's it going, Rich?
Morning, Chris. How we doing? Happy Monday.
Yeah, happy Monday. How about that? Is it happy? It sure is. And so what I'm going to do now is...
Sure, we're doing a Dev Talk Show. Of course
we should be doing a Dev Talk Show. Absolutely. And I wanted to get to post on the Dev Talk Show's brand new page on LinkedIn that we are live and that you can join us. So if you do follow us on Twitter or you follow us on YouTube, maybe you subscribed on YouTube, or what do you mean I haven't finished my post? I just want to post. Let's just do it. Let's go. Okay, I think I did it right. Maybe. I'm a little new to posting on a page on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
But in any case, we have a page on LinkedIn. And why is that important? Because we would love to stream on LinkedIn Live. And in order to do so, the Dev Talk Show needs followers. And so the Dev Talk Show is on LinkedIn, which probably means I should have a ready-to-go link for folks watching, which, of course, because we're great at everything here. Let's see. Oh, it looks like I do have it ready. LinkedIn. Now watch. Let's find out if I actually didn't mess up and that really does go to the right place. That's where you can find the Dev Talk Show on LinkedIn. So we're here, cool, as the title says, to talk about building ASP.NET Core from source. It looks like I got a little misspelling there, but that's okay. I'll fix that later. So if you're watching on Twitch, it may have just updated, and it might not have. I don't know for sure. So is this something you've ever done, Rich? Have you ever built the ASP.NET Core or ASP.NET? Well, I guess we didn't have that option in ASP.NET, but ASP.NET Core has been open source from the beginning.
Yeah.
And from even before it was final V1, you could join in and release for it. And did you ever bring the source code down and build it and run from it?
Not ASP.NET Core.
Okay.
I've done, the only thing I've done with it that was open source was we had Bot Framework.
Okay.
And I ended up doing that because I was running into an issue with how was it displaying something, and by going into the source code, I could see the decision it was making based on where that bot was running and how that was messing with what I wanted the UI to be. So that's the only time I've taken one of those open source repositories and done something where I ran it locally to debug it. But
okay,
no, it sounds really cool though.
Yeah, so I've never done this, and I have contributed on occasion to docs, either in .NET or I think mostly .NET, possibly ASP.NET Core. It's been a while. I wish that I was doing more there, and part of where I tended to jump in were things like maybe they had some directions on how to do something, and so I would follow them as though I was brand new to the product. In fact, in some cases, maybe I was brand new to the feature. So I would follow them, try to take a very naive approach to, let me do step one, let me do step two, let me do step three. And if I had any issues at all or found some kind of ambiguities, I would say like, well, maybe I can help here with this explanation. So,
sure.
But what I wanted to do, go ahead. I'm sorry.
That's just good community work, right? Yeah. If you're jumping in and doing, finding the right place to start in a community, sometimes that's the right place to start, right? And just being able to give some of that feedback to a project. I mean, ultimately, that's what we're driving with open source, public open source products, right? Is to foster that community and get that good interaction.
Yeah, and documentation is hard work, and as developers, I think we have a poor reputation for completing and providing documentation, and I think that some of it is that it's possibly a lot less exciting than the rest of the work,
Yeah.
and that when you come back after you've finished work, whatever it is, and you come back to document it, that's really difficult to put yourself
Mhm.
back in that mindset of like, okay, I'm starting from scratch. Sometimes the more familiar you are with your own product, the harder it is to explain to other people how to use it, how to start with it. Where so if you like a product, you're watching, and it does not have to be anything related to what we're talking about today. Take your favorite open source platform, your
Mhm.
favorite open source community. It doesn't matter. And you're looking for a place to get started, and you say, I don't know if I'm ready to contribute to code. I don't know. Like some people, you might just feel like, I don't know if I understand the product well enough. This source code is baffling me. Look at these. It's so professionally done. I'm afraid to contribute to it. You'll get there,
Yeah.
because believe me, I've certainly had that fear for many years now, and we've had ASP.NET for almost 10 years.
Mhm.
Um, but you can get started with docs, and you can get started by helping with things that you think maybe just aren't clear enough, or maybe the tutorial didn't quite work for you, but you understood enough to get through it. You're like, well, they said to do this in step 4, and I kind of did it, but when it didn't work, I knew what to do. Go
Right.
help there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because the next person comes along may not know what to do. Right.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
And
So
that
go ahead.
no, and that's super frustrating, right? You go
Yes.
and you look at it and read the doc and you get, but I'm doing what it says.
Right.
Why is it not going? Right.
Right. Yes. Yeah, I know. And I will say, we'll go through that. We'll go through. I want to go exactly through where I had some stumble.
Okay.
Rich knows that I tend to, and I'm going to go ahead and get my screen going here, which is not a single step process here on StreamYard, but let's do that. And that was pretty quick. I think that can be automated a little bit better, but as we're getting back here to the Dev Talk Show, we're using a brand new platform for us,
Mm-hmm.
but it's a platform that allows us to get moving. I mean, in minutes, whereas our pre-studio work, when we owned the whole production pipeline with OBS, was okay. Everybody get on, mic check, camera check,
Yeah.
and we kind of just let it take care of that. So
Makes it so much easier to do this first thing in the morning.
yes, exactly. First thing on a Monday morning, we can do this. So, where am I? I am here, and let's take a look at exactly where I am. I am in. Let's see. Here we go. Let's see if we've got Zoom it ready, and we do. I am here in the .NET organization, .NET, and the ASP.NET Core repository. And so, what does that mean if you're just coming to GitHub? Let's go github.com. Oops, let's spell it correctly. The fact that I misspelled that and it did not take me off to Never Neverland.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting that the browser appeared to catch that and say, hold on a second, because who knows what would have been behind door number 2 there in terms of a misspelling. So I'm just at my typical dashboard, and I could instead of going through the URL route, I could search for .NET, and if I search for .NET, I'm going to find the Microsoft .NET organization. Well, actually, what I really found was the .NET repo in the Microsoft organization, which is actually not where I want to be.
Okay.
It is, and I did want to point this out because it can be a little confusing. You can find out a lot of great information about .NET here. And for example, some great community maintained sites. Like this is a great site to go to. There's nothing wrong with coming to the Microsoft organization and .NET, but except you're just not going to find the code there.
Right.
So while you can click through here and find it, you will. In fact, here it is. Here it is right here. There are many projects that you can contribute to. ASP.NET Core, .NET MAUI, C#, blah, blah, keeps going. you can just go there, and you will get there. But let's do it from this direction, where now let's search for .NET. Oh, except I don't want to search within the repository. So let's take out that little qualifier. And here instead I have, interesting, I was hoping to find, here's what I wanted. I want .NET Platform, home of the open source .NET Platform. And you're going to see that it's github.com/dotnet instead of /Microsoft.
Yeah.
So you get here, and there's a ton of repositories here. Fortunately, ASP.NET Core is popular enough that it's going to be sitting, and it's pinned. That helps too, that it'll be very high in this list, just about always. And it's pinned to find very quickly. So we are at github.com/ASP.NET Core, github.com/dotnet/ASP.NET Core. There we go. And you get here and you see a bunch of code. And fortunately, one of the things that we're seeing is I don't want to say it's standard, because it's not, but it's getting better, is that you're seeing a lot of projects all throughout GitHub and all across the web are adopting this. The sources in SRC, the docs are in docs, and then there's a few other semi-standard repositories that folders that I often see. I don't remember what they are right now, but there's a contributing .markdown, and this is, I find, pretty common too. A lot of open source projects will have a contributing page, and this is really what we're going to end up at. But if I were to just scroll down to the README, and let's just say you just scroll down and started reading, you will get here, build ASP.NET Core source code. This is where I want to be. Build the ASP.NET Core repo. Okay. If you're reading the instructions, you're probably a contributor looking to understand how to build this repo. And that's true. So to get started, fork the repo and clone it locally. Now, do you have to fork the repo? When I put on my Git hat, I came to the realization that no, I do not have to. But I understand why they're saying to do it, because you're not going to be able to contribute directly back to this repo anyway. So forking it is a very quick operation. GitHub does that very quickly. You're going to clone it anyway. Could you fork their repo and then use git remote and point to your own repo and push it? Yes, you could do all the Git, martial arts or gymnastics that you want to do. But good workflow. They're not wrong there.
Right.
So I did that. And so what does that mean? That means that what I really want to do is I want to jump back to my repositories, which I will do by just clicking the home button. And it doesn't look like I'm appearing in my own top repositories. So, but here it is. So Space Shot, which is my username, /ASP.NET Core. This is my fork. And it even tells me that this is forked from .NET ASP.NET Core. So
nice.
Just showing where I'm at. I'm already 73 commits behind main, and I did this sometime late last week. But that's okay. I'm not concerned at all about catching up to main. We can do that. I don't know if we'll need to do that today. One of the things that's really neat is that GitHub now has a button that does it for you, which is pretty cool.
That's awesome.
This was something I used to have to teach people. This was a common question of fork a repository and I do some work, and now I've even committed the work, and now I don't know what to do, because and I think a lot of people have I assume maybe wrongly that a lot of people have now caught up to how to deal with that triangle of your fork, the original remote. But I could be wrong. That could still be a mystery to a lot of folks, and it's probably why we do a Git show every now and then.
Yes.
So the nice thing is GitHub has that button now. That's cool. So here we are. Then what did I do? Well, let's take a look at the docs, because the docs will show you pretty much what I did next. And I'm not opposed at all to having an episode where we do this from scratch. But I think today I really wanted to make sure we got to a point where we built and ran, hit a breakpoint, saw that we're actually touching our code. What is the experience like? And this happens to be on Windows. And you know us, we will explore this on Linux. We will explore this on other tooling. So First step, they recommend doing a git clone -- recursive. And so they have chosen to use the git submodules feature,
Okay.
which is a way that you can have multiple repositories that might all be part of a larger whole. There's a lot of controversy over how you should do things in Git, and I really think the best way is what works best for your team and your workflow. Should you just throw it all in one mono repository, or should they be separate, detached repositories? And in this particular case, they have a lot of sub repositories or sub modules. Mm-hmm. And then what Git allows you to do is it allows you to basically say, when you clone, you go ahead and clone those two, pull the sources from all the sub modules. And so this command worked just fine, except I replaced this with my GitHub username.
So, question about that.
Yeah.
So this is kind of I'm guessing this is quite a large repo. I mean, it looks like it from all the various different types of source blocks that are in there. If I want to do, we fork the repo, we do a clone local, all that's great. How do I know? You said there's submodules in there. How do I know where the submodules are? And can I just pull down the individual submodules?
So you probably could. And what I'm trying to do is get a terminal open so we can look at exactly that. So let's take a quick peek here. I used to know how, when you look at a repo, to figure out what the submodules are. And so what's going to happen here is we're going to look at Git's submodules documentation. And so you take an existing Git repository as a submodule, the repository you're working on. They have this Git submodules command, which I'm sure for many people, this is the first time you've ever seen this. And you basically say, hey, what are you pointing to? But what I'm wondering is a new Git modules file. And then this is a configuration file. That's what I wanted to find. I wanted to find out what the file is, because what we're going to do, this is not intended to be a show on submodules, because first of all, I would do a terrible job at that show right now. But I wanted to believe that we would find that Git submodules file
in the config.
Maybe I'm wrong. Where did you see?
There's a config, like third one down.
Oh, yeah. No.
Okay. We can search the repo.
According to Git, yeah, you're right. According to Git, it says, Git modules. Okay. And then to your point, let's go to it's Git modules. So it's here.
Oh, okay.
My brain read Git modules 2 or 3 times and then kept coming back here. So let's click on it.
Okay.
And as you can see, it's just this format, which says I've got a couple submodules. One of them is message pack C#. So really not as many as I thought.
Yeah.
And for some reason, I never looked at this.
Okay.
And for some reason, I thought this would be packed. And it turns out that there's just a couple of them. Fine.
And they're on different branches?
They're in totally different places, right? One of them is coming from Google's. And then, like you said, another one's coming from the ASP.NET organization. I'm not sure. One of these days, maybe when enough of you like and subscribe, and believe that, I didn't want to make that sound as bad as that just did. Maybe when we have enough great people in our community, just a huge community, then we'll get David Fowler on here.
Oh, nice. I didn't know where you were going with that. But yeah,
can you explain to us why and where the submodules are coming from? And David at this point might be say, hey, I've got a ton of great people to send to you to answer that question, because I see more and more people on a lot of these shows talking about this, which actually brings up a really good point. And it's something that we should probably address, is that I will see if I can find this while we are talking, because I really do need to link this in the show notes. I absolutely do. There is a video. Here it is right here. Now let me see if I can get this open without having it start talking, which I can. It's possible. It can be done. I have to mute the tab and then start the thing. So this was quite an inspiration, frankly. This was a ASP.NET community stand-up from a little over a year ago, contributing to ASP.NET Core. And when I was talking about how it doesn't necessarily have to be Damien or David, is they got a lot of contributions here from Safia, who explained the whole process. David took us through building in Visual Studio IDE. And actually, he didn't really build it. It was just kind of ready to go. And then Safia opened it up in GitHub Codespaces. And also on, I don't remember if it was her Mac or a Linux machine. I just don't remember. But she was doing everything in Visual Studio Code.
Oh, nice.
And so this was a really cool show, and it all worked, and everything was great. And so what I did is I kind of followed along to listen, but it turns out there was excellent show, and you should watch it. It's a couple years. It's it's over a year old now. So little tweaks here and there, but they did not go painfully through the build from source README, which is fine, right? And that's kind of what we're doing here is we're going a little bit more step by step through it. So you're watching the show and you say, hey, I can follow along, and then I'll kind of tell you where this maybe didn't perfectly work. So yes, for this first run through of it, we are on Windows. I will tell you that I've already begun experimenting with building on Linux for a future show, for future shows or future chances to come back to it. And so I did follow exactly what they said here. It said, hey, let's update the PowerShell execution policy. Fine. And it turns out that my execution policy was not set to basically allow remote signed execution under my particular user. Let's see. So on Windows, they recommend installing Visual Studio. And the reason why is I think they feel it's probably the least and most frictionless way to get the C++ and tooling onto your machine without that. And what they talk about is use the official installer script in the repo. That was interesting to me. I have known about these installer scripts, and I have never tried using them or making one. So it turns out I really did use what they said here. I did not need to do this, where this actually installs Visual Studio. This is a PowerShell script that installs Visual Studio Enterprise Preview and then goes ahead and sets it up to be exactly the way you need it for this work. I'm going to have the install. Of course it starts. Oh, cool. I thought it was going to start the Instagram app, but I'm going to let the installer cook up here. And now that I think about it, I might only have this working in preview. So that's an important thing that I'll have to remember. I could be wrong. We'll see what happens when I fire it up. Maybe I'm wrong about that. So this link to following instructions from installing from a config file, this did work well for me because it turns out that there are components missing. There are, in other words, I didn't have, especially as they predicted, I didn't have all the C++ stuff installed. So kind of as predicted, that worked. And this really does work, this import a configuration. They're talking about exporting a configuration here, but the import a configuration works. You go to the installer and you say, actually, I don't want to do this here. You want, you have your particular version of Visual Studio. You go to more and you say import configuration. And this wants a file. It wants a VS config file. And so what happens is you come back to the repo and there is a VS config file in here. I think they talk about where it is. Did I already lose? I did. I did lose it. So here we go. They already talk about where that is. Use the VS config file in the root of the repository, which is not here. It is here though.
Yeah, it should be down.
There it is.
Yep.
That really does work. That really did. One step worked. It updated Visual Studio. Okay, fine.
Oh, wow.
And what that was the path of least resistance just to get C++ on the machine. And they were right about that. All right. So next up, Before you open the project in Visual Studio, they say install the required dependencies and set up the repo by running restore. Okay, so what that means is that in there, here we are. Let's go to my version of the code, and we will just because we're taking a quick peek. There is a restore command, and then if you're on Linux or Mac, or some of you have a script for that, you run that just as it says. And I think I can even do that now. And what it does is it starts building a lot of dependencies that you're going to need. Some of these are node-based dependencies. Some of these are C++ dependencies.
Okay.
And it just goes to work. Doesn't take super long. So basically, though, here is a place where I had multiple bugs, errors. I don't know if I want to call it bugs. The first one was I was stubborn. I'm just being honest. I was stubborn. And I thought to myself, I'm kind of afraid of doing this config file thing. So why don't I just go add C++ to Visual Studio install? And sure enough, I'm certain that there was a component or two that I did not get, or something in this individual components, which this is nice and small. I'm sure everybody loves this, but it was probably stuff sitting in here in this part of it.
Yeah. That's
that like CMake is not there. Yeah, CMake isn't there. Whoops. I bet you CMake wasn't there, or maybe one of these redistributables. And so I said, okay, fine. Let's do the import configuration. And then it all just started working. So how did I know? How did I know that I was having some problems? And the way I knew is in this restore script, it didn't get very far. I mean, it must have only gotten about, here's the beginning of it here. Determining projects to restore. Yeah. I bet you I probably got to about here. And then the screen just went red. Just boom, 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 boom. And it turns out that sure enough, you go looking for other people saying, oh my gosh, my screen went red with all this stuff. And they say, well, do you have the C++ stuff installed? Oh, I don't know. I'm not sure. And yeah, so that was it. So, okay. So pay attention, right? And then the second place where I ran into an issue is I actually didn't have, for whatever reason, I didn't have a recent version of Node on this machine. I'm going to use NVM list right now to see what I had. So it shows here that 18.16, I believe that 18.16.1 happens to be the current LTS.
Mm-hmm.
But I had this 16.9 was my current. And as you can see, I use Node Version Manager for Node. Have you ever heard of Node Version Manager?
I don't do a lot of Node development. Yeah.
So a while ago, I decided to use this. Basically, what it allows me to do is I can come in here and I can say, go install a certain version of Node. And then I can also say use, and it switches it.
Oh, cool.
Now, the magic behind it, I don't know. Probably some pathing, point some pathing, set some environment variables. But it turns out the NVM project has existed in the Linux, Mac, open source world for quite a while. This turns out to be the Node Version Manager for Windows, which is a different project. And it doesn't quite do things the same way. For example, there is no NVM list command in the other NVM project. And I want to be fair, there might be a couple forks of NVM and other competing projects, because I've used this for a while. But when I recently went over to Linux to do the same thing, I kind of found like, well, there is an NVM here, and it is the one I've used before, but there seem to be others now too. So, if folks that are watching say, look, the community's kind of moved on, and here's what you should be, fine. And maybe we can fix that on a future show. We would love to get your feedback and your input. But this worked pretty well in Windows, just for me to very quickly get the latest LTS. Once I had the latest LTS built again, everything built.
Nice.
I got all the way down to this wonderful message we all love: 0 warnings, 0 errors.
Success.
Yeah, success. And so back in their instructions, they now say this, and this is discussed in the video, is you typically will focus on one project in the repo. You will not open, typically, this giant ASP.NET Core solution. A few of the people in the video, I want to say that it was both Damien and Safia were saying, no, David and Safia were saying like, oh, you can't do that. It's too big. It's not going to work. And Damien Edwards, who very famously a couple years ago, I remember watching some Odyssey on Twitter where he was going to build this ultimate machine. I mean, and it was more than just he's going to spend a couple dollars. It was making very deliberate choices of motherboard and CPU, and so that way he gets the highest performing disk access and the highest performing network and everything. So It was really fun to watch. And so he very famously told them like, well, I can build it all on my machine. And they were saying like, oh, I don't really build the whole repo that often. It takes too long. And Damien goes to his command line and like does .NET build, and they talk for about 30 more seconds. And he's like, oh, it's done. And they're all super jealous. And I think, I want to say, I don't remember for sure, I think he might have opened the full solution on his machine just to show off.
Wow.
Am I saying that I wouldn't be able to do that? I might. It might work just fine, but we're not. We're going to kind of do what they say today, which is go to a component and start VS from there.
Okay.
So here is where I may run into some issues trying to make sure it opens the correct one, but let's see. So here I am, core repo. Let's do a git status real quick just to see what Git thinks. Git thinks that I'm up to date with origin main, and when it says that, it means I'm up to date. I'm going to do a git remote /v just to show I'm up to date with my version of the repo.
Yeah.
So as we saw earlier, this particular version of the repo is something like 70 some commits behind. We could even try updating it a little bit later. We'll see how much time we have. But my version of the repo, I'm up to date with it. Everything's fine. So the trick now is I say start VS. And but first, actually, I don't say start VS. First, I want to pick a component. So let's just do a quick look at these different folders. First, I'm going to want to go to the source folder. Okay. So let me cd into source. And now that I'm here, we see a bunch of different things to work on. Now, am I going to be able to tell you in this episode that I know exactly which one to drop into for whatever feature you want to work on? No. But we can look at, we're going to look at HTTP because it's one of the places I was able to drop a breakpoint into and get working quickly. But if you have some work you want to do on SignalR, which I think would be very interesting, you go into this folder. If you want to work on Razor, if you want to work on MVC, and when you work on MVC, that doesn't just mean like you might say to yourself, where's Blazor, right? There's actually a whole other video in the .NET YouTube about contributing specifically to Blazor, and they talk about like where Blazor's kind of sitting. Some of it's in components, I believe. And then MVC kind of became a catch-all for a lot of things. Are you going to find like minimal APIs and stuff in there? So sometimes you got to find out where it is.
Okay.
In this case, we're going to go to HTTP. Oh, of course, the auto completion did more than I wanted. So we are sitting in HTTP. All right. And in every one of these folders, there is its own start VS. And now here's where we find out if we know what we're doing today. We're going to say start VS. And what you can't see is that it did open, and I know how I got to this place, is it did open preview. I can't move it over to this screen yet. Actually, that's not true. Oh, no, it's not going to respond to it didn't respond to the window message from Windows to say switch monitors until it already opened the repo. So it did open the preview version of Visual Studio. And if you're like me and you have multiple versions, what will frustrate you, so hopefully this is helpful to people, what will frustrate you is that start VS command very well could open one you don't want.
Right.
I've always had some difficulties getting, like, have you ever opened a VS a solution file, maybe straight from Explorer or something, and it says, which version do you want to use? And one of them is that Visual Studio version selector.
Yeah.
I've tried clicking that. I've had moderate success. I've had like, sometimes it does exactly what I want. Sometimes it's like, no, it's still picked an older version. And I don't know what the logic is there.
Okay.
But the way that I kind of got this to work, your mileage may vary on how much you like about this, is there is a feature of Visual Studio, this SLNF file, which is it's a version of the solution file that I believe what you can do is you can build a larger solution file out of smaller SLNF files, but you can still open these just as though they're solutions. I think that is correct.
Okay.
So in order to make sure that every time I did start VS, that it just did what I wanted and opened preview, and let's see if I can show you using the start menu here, I said, I never remember where to find this stuff. So I'm going to type default programs. And this is what I want. Choose a default app for each type of file. This is what I really want. And it's going to open this part of the settings, which you may, if you're a longtime Windows user, you may remember when this would look very different. And every single one of your extensions is linked optionally to files. And that's how Windows, all the way since Windows 95, has gotten that double click on something and the app you want opens. Right. This has not changed just because the interface has changed. And I went in and I found SLNF, which I should spell correctly and not make it SINF. SLNF. And what I did is I specifically set it to Visual Studio 22 Preview. Now, I want to make it clear, you do not have to use Preview. At least I'm fairly certain about this. You don't have to use Preview to do this. I'm about when I say I'm fairly certain, I don't mean 51%. I'm like 99%, because the reality is you're building the source. So this isn't like, oh, you got to have. I just chose to do it because in their sample they did it. That is I was a total sheep on that. I just said like, well, whatever, let's just do it in Preview. I had no reason to pick it. But once I did, and I kind of went down that road, I said, well, let me just go ahead and set SLNFs to open in Preview so that it will always do what I want when I say start VS.
Okay.
Start VS says open up this SLNF. You can see where it goes from there. Windows says, oh, then you must want this. So here we are. We are in the Visual Studio 2022 Preview, and we are looking at the code. But there's an additional piece that we haven't done yet, it turns out. If I type .NET list SDKs, we're going to see that I've got quite a bit. I've got a lot of 6s. I've got some 7s, a 7 preview. I've got a 5RC that I kind of wonder why it's still there. And then there's a little bit of an advertisement, like, why don't you install 8 preview, which I could do. There would be nothing wrong with doing that. But the reality here is we are building from source. So none of this is important. And if we head back to this, one of the things that they talk about here is it says you can now build, debug, and test using Visual Studio. Is that when you use Visual Studio Code in another editor, they say, oh, well, activate the locally installed .NET by running the following command. It turns out that there is a PowerShell script for Windows, and then there's a different script for Linux or Mac. That what this really does is this sets all of the paths and environment variables to point to your built source as though you installed it. And then and it also kind of clears the decks of all the other versions, and the only one on your machine is .NET 8, as far as your machine knows. Why do you need to know this? Because if you're following down this list, you're doing everything I did. You do a start VS, and the first thing you do, you're super excited, and you go to build and run, and it doesn't work. And what you get is you get an error that says metadata file not found. I am pretty confident this will happen to you. And there's a few reasons why I'm pretty confident. And one of them I am going to bring up while I'm kind of talking about it is that I am confident it'll happen to you because there is another step that you will very likely have to do where you need to build the entire source tree from the command line, even though in this particular show, in this particular day, we're going to use the IDE.
Okay.
And that might sound like weird, like they're not talking about having to do this, and I agree with you. And so what ended up happening, I want to give credit where credit is due. I found this particular from 4 years ago, build ASP.NET Core from source, goes through the process. Everything was going the same for the most part, little tweaks here and there. As you can see, this is an older Visual Studio. But when you get to about right here, it's coming, I promise. He's doing the same thing, execute restore, use start VS, right? And then what are the common problems you might have? And I had this exact problem. Exactly. You may get an error code CS006 with this message, metadata file could not be found. And so he talks about what the root cause is, but then says you can fix this in one of two ways, build the project on the command line. In most cases, this solves the problem, and it did work for me.
Okay.
So I wanted to make sure I called that out, because if you do what I said when I started this off and say, well, I got to this part and I feel like it should work and it doesn't work for you, I feel like maybe there's some way to maybe put in here that, listen, if you're still having trouble, then try building from source. But the problem is you can't really build from the command line until you activate, which I have to go back. I have to go back to the source tree. So here I am in source is where activate is, or do I have to, I think I might have to go back to the repo.
Level up.
Yep. So I have to go all the way back to the repo's root, ASP.NET Core, hit activate. I'm sorry. And I'm glad that they even tell you this. They're like, you have to execute it this way in PowerShell. I used to know what this meant. I don't know right now. So when you do this, look how it kind of changes my world here. What's really nice is they throw a little thing on the command line for you to say, hey, you know, just so you know, you're in kind of this ASP.NET Core weirdness land. And they've changed the .NET pointer to point to what you built here, what you when you did the restore process, your .NET exe. And now you can say, now you can run build PS1, or I'm sorry, I think you can do .NET build, did he say? .NET build. Is that right? Why don't we go back to the thing it says here? Running build.command. Okay. So let's double check. Not sitting here.
See that there.
So let's go to source. I don't see it here either. What were you going to say?
If you're sitting in that folder, the ASP.NET or ASP.NET Core, wouldn't it?
Oops.
Is it pulling from there, or is it pulling from where you're locally running? So, I mean, I guess what I'm getting at, does that build command? There you go.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if I understand correctly, the reason for this is these individual solutions might have dependencies that weren't built.
Sure.
So when you open this SLNF and you try to use it, it's like, oh, well, this dependency I'm counting on isn't here.
Mm-hmm.
And he does talk about this in the video and explains that if you want to, you could just add the dependency, update the solution to include the missing project. I kind of didn't want to do that.
Yeah.
I'm not even saying that it's bad. I just didn't want to. So I tried this bullet point, and when it worked, I was happy. And this was just a simple build command, and a bunch of stuff happens. And hopefully now we get to the money now that it's 8:30 here, and it works from here. But we're gonna find out. So
that build command and that setting up of the activate piece is actually letting it point to the version 8, which you don't have installed if you list the SDKs, but it needs for this project to specifically run and build.
It needs the version that so this sounds funny. When you ran that restore command,
okay,
it does more than just like it's a little bit more than an npm restore or a NuGet restore. There is some preliminary DLL building going on.
Okay.
And that does a lot of important things, but then when you are now going to work on one of these sub solutions, for lack of a better term, it turns out that that sub solution does not yet have the dependencies it needs. At least it didn't in the pool of the source code that I did the other day. And so coming out and doing a build works. But the problem is you come out to do that build at the command line, even though you've been following the instructions for Visual Studio, you come out to do that build from the command line, but the command line needs this activation step. Because remember earlier when I showed you .NET List SDKs?
Yes.
Now that I've activated, first of all, that's odd. What did I do here? Oh, I know what I did. We did not double dash it. The only one on the system that comes back is your preview version that you built that's living at C source ASP.NET Core /.NET.
Okay.
That's part of this activation. From what I can tell, does two things. It makes yours a true blue .NET version in terms of environment variables and pathing that the .NET executable kind of expects.
Yeah.
But it makes your built version the one, and it clears the decks. The others are all out, right?
Right.
You deactivate later by just typing the word deactivate.
That was going to be a question. Yeah.
And it puts it back. So when it puts it back. Now, when I do the very same .NET List SDKs command, I'm kind of back where I was. And now you can even see that it's pointing to C program files .NET SDK.
Sure.
Which tells you that we could go spelunking through our environment variables, and there's a .NET environment variable that says, okay, .NET, when you're looking for SDKs, look in this folder and you'll find them in subfolders.
Right.
Once you activate, you've changed that pointer. And so the .NET executable says, well, there's only one here, and it's this preview 7. Who knows what that is, but I don't care.
Yeah.
And you don't care either because you're about to go to work. So I should not have to be activated to work here in Visual Studio. I should not have to be. But let's if you've been waiting to see a breakpoint hit, we should probably do that. So what's the first thing I tried to do? The first thing I tried to do is what am I going to run here? And it turns out that there are samples. Where are they located? So there are samples embedded in the solution. Hopefully, is this pretty good font size over here on the upper right? I can always zoom in if I have to.
It looks good. It's got a little bit of that, where the font is like in between sizes. It's like not too big, not too small. It gets that little bit cut off. But for where we are now, I think it's readable.
Okay, yeah. So up here in the solution folder, I opened up HTTP. And what you're going to see is I'm going to scroll down, and there is a samples. And what's kind of nice about this is I was able to kind of just say like, oh, well, there's a sample minimal API. I may have to go figure out why my dog is yelping for a second. There's a minimal API sample, and this is what this program CS is. So hold on. He might have gotten stuck. Hold on just a moment. I'm really sorry.
Yeah, go for it. Yeah. All right. We're in a bit of a break here while we wait for Chris to go check and make sure everything is okay at home. If you're just jumping in and joining us on the live stream here, we're looking through some of the ASP.NET Core source code, and we're just about to get to the point where we're going to try and run this code.
Yeah, I'm not sure what my dog was upset about, but he might. So anyways, so there's already a minimal API sample here. So what I figured is, well, what if we set that as the current project?
Okay.
And this was the first thing I did is I said, I really want to see what happens when you map get. I would love to see that. So I went ahead and said, okay, let's just run this app. I literally just come up here and just click this, boom. And then a bunch
good old F5 debugging.
Good old F5, right? And then again, this is the Visual Studio experience. I think in the future, I'd love to look at the Visual Studio Code experience, or even other stuff would be really cool. But I just kind of wanted to see. So, it's getting the whole thing fired up, and we're going to hit that breakpoint.
Boom.
Famous last words. I just wanted to see if I could find. So the breakpoint's been hit. Where is the executable? Here it is. Here's the executable. We don't really need it on the screen, but it's sitting there. So what did I do is I said, well, I want to F11 into this. Right? I want to see where it goes. And let's see if it does the same thing it did then. It goes, well, hold on. Hot reload can't apply your changes. And I was like, huh? Well, okay. So first I tried, well, let's reapply changes. And then what happens is it just restarted the app.
Right.
And so you do this again, and you end up in this loop.
Yeah. Can you disable hot reload?
Well, it's got nothing to do with hot reload. It turns out what I found out is map get, and I'm pretty sure about this. I hope I'm not wrong. Map get is built by a source generator. So C# feature, source generators came out. I want to say came out in .NET 6, maybe 5. I don't remember now. Now I feel terrible that I was pretty confident, and then I just instantly lost that confidence that it was 6 or 5. I don't know if you've ever used source generators, Rich. I mean,
I've not.
I think interesting show topic that we've never gotten around to.
Okay.
So what that means is there's nothing to F11 into except the source generator, but the source generator comes along at compile time and builds the code. So what's happening is if I try to F11 into it, then Visual Studio is saying, well, this doesn't work with hot reload, so I'm going to have to rebuild the code and get you back to where you're at. But once you do that, you're back here, and you're back here again, and then you say, well, now F11 into it, and Visual Studio says, hold on, I can't do that. This is generated code, and like you just end up, it's, Captain, there's a dark and stormy night, and the pirates said to the captain, "Captain, tell us a story." And so the captain began. It was a dark and stormy night. The pirates said to the captain, "Tell us a story." And so the captain began, right? It's one of those. So I said, well, that's not going to help. I'm going to have to find a different thing to drop into here. Yeah. And what ended up happening is, what did I find? Let's see. I came here then and said, okay, HTTP context. That is mostly, and maybe not completely, I could be wrong, built from a source generator. That's HTTP context is an old, tried and true, important part of the framework. So if I even F12 here on get endpoint, I get to code. And not only did I get to code, I get to code. This isn't like decompiled from source. That is at my C source ASP.NET Core, blah, 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 extension method. Here we are. Awesome. Like, this is what you want to see. Code on my machine. Yeah. So I don't even really need this breakpoint, although I'll go ahead and leave it here anyway. Let's let this continue through mapping the root. And we get to, I don't think I'm in an infinite loop here. I think this next time through.
Yeah, you're good, right? Because it got you to here.
It got me to get endpoint. Oh, okay. Hold on. Maybe I really do. Let's just disable it for now. Oh, it all blew up. So maybe. Oops. So don't start by. It's funny thing is, I don't remember having that happen to me the first time. I felt like I was able to push through without restarting. But I'm going to be fair. I might have hit the stop button reflexively on it. I might have just been like, nah, let me just start over. That's very possible. So I restarted the app, immediately hit my get endpoint breakpoint. Here I am in my code, basically based on the context, it's figuring out, what is the endpoint here. It's saying if context is null to throw, it's not going to do that. And then I could dive into this code and figure out how it's getting the particular endpoint back, but it's not that big a deal to me, frankly. Okay. And it's going to hit this a couple times. It's going to call get endpoint a couple times. So let's get rid of this breakpoint. and let the app start. And one of the things that the app does is it has you even saw it in the map get, is they have this little quick dummy, or I shouldn't call it dummy, but just this real quick endpoint. Here it is. This real quick, simple endpoint that, like, if you're just going to index, you're getting some basic stuff.
Right.
Basic stuff. So there it is. Basic stuff.
Cool.
Yeah. And that was a long way to go to get to. But there's some other places too. Like, for example, they're testing out minimal APIs. So they test some nested APIs, and they test some different filters. And I know that there's an endpoint here where you can provide, I want to say you can provide it your name. Yes, this is the one. If you do the index, but you provide a query string, is that right? Well, I guess we can find out.
Yeah.
I guess we can find out. Yeah, because this is going to be, that's right. This is going to be the query string. Well, why don't we just go find out? So if I come here and I say, is it a query string, or do I just put my name? No, that wasn't it. I'm trying to remember what this was. Map get is first this, and then group name, nested name. Does that mean that I need to put in? Oh no, hold on. Here's say hello. Map get hello name. This is the one I was looking for.
Oh, okay.
This I'm so yeah. Don't listen to me. So this is what I was looking for, was if you pass in hello and your name, then it says hello. Okay, great. And so if I come up here and I just do something really simple, like say hello and pass in my name, then it says hello me. And I could probably come in here and figure out, like say hello is going to get fired. I am not 100% sure if this breakpoint's going to hit, but I think it will. Yep. So breakpoint was hit, and I could theoretically debug here. So
that's pretty awesome.
I'll be honest. Is that as exciting as it was? Because when I show it now, I go, yeah, I know we're not doing a whole lot. We're using a sample, but I was excited the first time that I said, hold on. Now, yes, I know I'm just debugging my app, but then I can jump into code too, like actual ASP.NET code.
Yeah.
So I could start figuring out, like, how does the context get built up and torn down, or maybe play with one of my favorite features, SignalR, or what I really want to do, which is find a problem to fix. Not that I 100% know how to go about that, but probably the next question here that people have is, okay, so we walked through the build from source.
Mm-hmm.
I believe, after reading it, that there might be some room to contribute ideas for troubleshooting in here. Even if they just want to say, like, well, let's not put it here. Can you add a troubleshooting link, like another markdown file to troubleshoot to? But I feel like I would say, like, hey, I've done this a couple times from scratch, and it keeps happening. This, and then this. So we kind of want to let people know. That would be a great way to contribute. Another way to contribute is to go to their issues list, and they don't have a whole lot here that needs work. There's only 2.7. There's only 2,700 open issues. So
nice.
We should be good. And you can start looking through this and saying, like, wow, there's a ton of stuff here. So what do you do? And here's what, frankly, we are going to do. Is we're going to say, we're going to filter by label. And a lot of projects have this, a good first issue. Sometimes it's not necessarily called good first issue. Gosh, I'm trying to remember what it's also called. It's called like a jump in, or, well, anyways. But since good first issue is a label that they use, I am now filtering by that.
Mm-hmm.
And now what we can do is we can say, okay, let's take a look at some of these. And should we, is here one that's interesting to do, quick grid add over scan count parameter. Now, it might be that someone's already working on this. In fact, in this case, it says no one's assigned. Sometimes someone's already picked it up and they'll say, hey, you know, quick grid with virtualization enabled has a default overscan count of 3. This can't be modified. I would like quick grid to have an overscan count parameter. So there'd be a little bit of work to do. And it looks like that this was approved. And, you know, they're even saying, hey, if you want to do it, go for it. Do some tests. Might be an interesting one. I don't know if this person is going to jump in or if they just identified it as something they'd like. But we could certainly look for something like help wanted and good first issue. Put both of those together. Might be good places to look. Some of them they scare me a little bit. But then maybe something like this. I don't know.
Okay.
Created result should accept null location. Might make you feel like, well, okay. If something happens here, then you end up see create result throws. And this person is saying, I feel like I should get a 201. And then I guess they must have discussed it. And I'd have to read this. I certainly would have to read it and see what happened. Interesting that there's already been some work that's gone on here. I didn't see if it was assigned either. So what you commonly do is come in here and tell them what you want to do is part of the issue and see if you can get assigned to it, mainly just so that people don't start stepping on each other.
Yeah.
With PRs and stuff.
It's a kind of good workflow.
Yeah. So there's work to do here.
So there are 38 open issues there that have that tag on it. So there's a good bit of things that we can look around and see what makes sense to do as one to walk through.
I would certainly love to walk through one. And hopefully that even what we've done today for somebody who comes along and finds this will be able to replicate, you know, what we've done and get things working. But I thought super exciting to say, oh, well, look, I hit code in the ASP.NET Core source code from an app that's running. And granted, this is just a sample app. There's a couple other ways I could go about this. I believe what I could probably do is I could probably create another sample app. And if I wanted to, I could even put it right in here in this sample section, only to keep it in one spot. And maybe start to work out what it is I'm working on, or I could write tests. You know,
kind of help with the code coverage.
Well, and actually they do want unit tests when you submit. I'm not sure 100% sure that's where the tests were. I haven't looked to figure out where the tests are, but one thing that I can do, I know I can open Test Explorer. And we can see them. We can see them. Here they are. And the last time I executed them all, they all passed, which is great. But first of all, so if I'm wondering about where tests are, well, okay, let's come here and let's go here. And let's pick the default HTTP context test and let's double click. And now here I am. I should be in the code. Let me get this out of the way. So here I am. And if I just want to know where it is, I can always come up here in Solution Explorer, sync with the active document, and, well, first of all, let's click the correct one. But yeah, it's right here. So it's in HTTP and then tests and then default HTTP context test. Okay, cool. Now I know where the tests are. And yeah, I could definitely, there's two ways to go about it. And if you watch that YouTube video where the team itself introduces contributing, they certainly often work by creating unit tests. But I feel, for me personally, if I'm like super, super brand new to the project and the code, I may not feel super comfortable yet. I might want to say, well, let me build like a little sample that exercises what I want. And then now I can figure out what tests go with this. And then maybe I write some unit tests, be very test driven about it. Certainly understanding how they test makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
But doesn't it look pretty straightforward though? I love it. Right? Arrange, insert, boom. So it looks promising.
Yeah, definitely. Is there also been, you were talking about things that you might do to kind of get yourself ready to make some kind of those updates and things. Do you find there's benefit in just, hitting a breakpoint on the thing that you want to kind of modify and just walk me through it, show me what the code where's this code going and how it behaves?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I imagine you in any project, especially one this big, at first, and this is just me, I just want to see how it works.
Yeah.
I'm not ready to start fixing the machine without even understanding what it does, like, at all.
Right.
Now, I think mastery of the whole thing is probably that's not the bar you're looking for.
Right.
It's just a little bit of comfortability of like, okay, I kind of see I kind of see how this particular piece works, whether it doesn't need, like, for instance, I wouldn't have to work on Signal R by understanding all of Signal R,
Sure.
but if there was a bug related to Signal R, could I at least create the situation that brings up the bug? And yes, I could do that through unit testing, but maybe for someone who's not quite comfortable with the code yet, can I do it through a sample? And then,
Hmm.
yep, sure enough, not only did I recreate the bug, I've come to the code that's the bug's problem, and I've hit the breakpoint, and there it is, and I can see what's going on. That might make me feel a little more comfortable that the unit tests I'm writing actually address the problem,
Yeah.
instead of maybe fooling myself that my unit test the unit test doesn't turn out to fix any, demonstrate anything, but you think it does.
Yeah.
Um, I think there is a ton to learn here from my opinion. I would love to kind of look through their testing and learn a little bit. I'm sure they would love that I'm putting this kind of pressure on them of like, how does an enterprise software team building something so important with so many customers,
Hmm.
how do they go about their unit testing?
Yeah.
Um, for example, I, I have no comment on this statement. I just noticed it. What I'm not seeing here is mock. I just don't see it. It's not here.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I don't know why. I'm not trying to say
Interesting.
that's good or bad. I will say that I don't know if we've talked about on this show that I am wary of mocking. Like, it worries me sometimes. Um, because I've had the experience, which a lot of people here may have had, of you mock out a bunch of stuff to make these tests work, and then the design changes and your unit tests are
Hmm.
just all trash because you've got to go update all of them, all the mocks. And so many mocking experts would say, well, you've kind of over mocked there. That's your real problem. And then people who are total anti mocks would say, well, see, that's the problem with mocks and you shouldn't have them. And they go, okay, that's fine.
Hmm.
I just want to get some work done. So what's a good way to go about this? And that's one thing that stood out to me. Without, I can't make any comment on why. I just thought that was interesting. And then when I came over here to cookie option tests, I noticed it again. I said, oh, that's interesting. And the
Hmm.
other thing about it is that there's some, like, I could even come here and say remove unused usings, and wow, this is
Use that
just,
reflection.
it only needs reflection. How so maybe that's a good thing. Maybe that's a sign that these cookie options tests are very, very narrowly focused on cookie options. It could
Hmm.
also be a sign that the cookie options this cookie options class maybe is very pure. I don't know. I don't know that it is. I obviously haven't looked at it, but perhaps it's very pure and it's very input gives you output. And in fact, it kind of looks like it's pretty straightforward.
Hmm.
Certain input gives you certain output, which is great as a developer. So, I think that there is a lot to learn from this, I think.
And so let me turn the question, I guess, the other way. By learning all of that, how does that help you build ASP.NET apps, right? Because I mean, if you're going to go through that process and do all of that, right? Are you going to see that benefit when you go to build apps going forward?
Yeah. I mean, could you be inspired by some of the things they do? Or even just like, I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah.
That's what we're gonna find out, I think.
I think so. I mean, ultimately, that's what we hope winds up happening, right? There are some portion, like you have. I mean, just from us from doing the show together and working and being part of the community together forever, I know you have a lot of interest and knowledge and understanding when it comes to Signal R. So is that a place? I know you pointed that off as one of the potential projects to look at, but is that maybe a good place to look at, because that can maybe translate into something that you wind up writing for an application because of what you know about Signal R? I don't know.
Yeah, that's what we're going to find out. So I mean, we're getting close to time, but certainly I feel like we know we can build from source now. I think now the trick is pick an issue, get to work on it, show our progress here, see if we can contribute to ASP.NET Core source, which would be really fun. And then at the same time, what do we learn from that experience? And I'm still kind of an open book on it, but this is the path you can use if you want to get this working in Windows and Visual Studio IDE. Certainly works. I would like to figure out how to do this in some other environments, and we can share that with folks too. But my understanding is that, I mean, so again, this video is a little old, but that video that I showed everybody, in the video, Safia just opens up code spaces.
That was going to be a question, but I saw that in the docs. I figured I would let it go.
yeah. Which I haven't tried, but that's cool if that just works.
Yeah.
Because then it makes you feel like even if you don't want to wait for code spaces, we've talked about how you can use the dev containers on your own machine. So
yeah, which can maybe get you around, certainly around it should get you past that SDK activate issue, right? Because the only one on there is going to be it might. Maybe it doesn't.
Yep. Absolutely. So anyways, it's almost time for stand up here.
Okay.
And hopefully this was fun. Hopefully folks had a good time and learned a few things.
I did. That was awesome.
Yeah. Well, I hope it helps you if anybody who says, I want to get started with ASP.NET Core, the docs do a great job. They really do. And I was afraid to dismantle it and try doing it live just in case. So there was a little hand waviness of like, I did this, but you didn't get to watch me do it for the most part. But I think I explained the two major hurdles that I had in terms of use that activate, build from command line. Please pay attention to them when they say to just use the VS config. Yeah, it was definitely easier. Use the VS config. And I'll make sure to link the other gentleman's video because that might help you. His troubleshooting section turned out to be the exact answer I needed for building. Nice. And here we are. We're on our way with ASP.NET Core. Hopefully you are too.
Very cool. Awesome. Thanks, Chris.
Cool. So later this week, I don't have a time for everybody yet, but we are definitely, I think we're looking at doing one more show this week.
Yeah, yes. Yes, definitely going to do one more, probably late in the week if it looks right.
Yeah, I think so too. And then I think next week you are out.
Yeah, I'm off for vacation.
Yeah, and I know that I actually not this week, the week of the 17th, the week of the 24th. It might be possible to do a couple solo shows, especially maybe on this topic. But I know for sure that there are some days that I am going into the office that week. And when I do that, I leave house really early. So there wouldn't be shows then. But we'll keep people up to date. And we're getting really close to where we feel comfortable about announcing these on Twitter. Right. So people know that they're coming, and maybe even getting scheduled YouTube broadcasts on YouTube. So if you like and subscribe, you should see those too. All right. But in any case, time for stand up here. Let's get moving.
Cool. Awesome.
And everybody, hope you had a great time. If you did, please follow us on Twitch. If you're watching on Twitch, if you're watching on YouTube, either now or in the future, please like and subscribe. If you have any questions, ask them in the comments. If there's more you want to see on this topic, ask in the comments, and we will focus some of these future morning hours on that. Follow us on Twitter, the Dev Talk Show, to see what's going on next. And yeah, we are trying to get moving on LinkedIn. It would be awesome to stream there. There's a ton of developers on LinkedIn. It'd be great for them to see the show.
Absolutely.
So for Rich Ross, I am Chris Gomez, and hopefully you all have a great day, and we'll see you next time on the Dev Talk Show.